Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey everybody, welcome into episode 57. All right, in this one, we're going to be talking in depth about how to brace yourself, because we're going to talk about two words that most web designers fear and just dread, and that is collect content. Yes, we're going to be talking about collecting content from your web design clients, but more importantly, how to actually do it well and how to efficiently get that content. Because I found that there are really two main areas of web design that are just like the bane of our existence as web designers. One, we tackled a handful of episodes back on episode 50, which was how to limit revisions. I found revisions and feedback to be one of the biggest aspects of web design that can be draining and drag a project out for a long time. The other aspect of it is collecting content, and that's what we're going to tackle in this episode. And for this talk, I've brought in somebody who I consider to be a real master at this subject, and this is my colleague, James Rose. He's been on the podcast before. He was on the podcast a while back. We talked about how to automate aspects and areas of your business. But the thing about James is that he's really big on this idea of how to collect content from your clients. In fact, he got so familiar with it and learned so much about it that he ended up creating a software called Content Snare, which is all about collecting content from clients in order to help speed the process up and make sure you don't, devastate yourself during a project. But the cool thing about this is what we cover in this episode, it doesn't matter what tools you use. We lay out practical and actual proven real-world tested strategies for collecting content, no matter, again, what project management system you use or whatever tools you use that are really going to help you. So I can't wait to hear how this episode helps you out. Now, if you're curious about a little more about my methods with how I've collected content from clients over the years, I do share quite a bit in this interview. However, I really take it to the next level in my web design business course. So if you like this interview and you really want to learn more about how to collect content and you'd like to see what I've actually done, like real world examples and screen flows or screencasts of me, like walking you through how I have all my templates set up, and you want to get access actually to my email templates and everything, I'd love to provide that for you, and we can do that through my web design business course. And I would love to help you in your web design business, particularly in this area of collecting content. But without further ado, I want to get right into it because James is just a wealth of knowledge in this subject. And again, he's the creator of Content Snare, but that's just one tool of many that you can use in collecting content. So no pressure on that. I want you to enjoy this episode and apply all these principles. However, if you do want to go with Content Snare, I've arranged a special deal for you guys as my listeners, and you can use promo code Josh Hall, all one word, for 20% off Content Snare. And the cool thing about it is they have a free trial, so you can always give it a go, see how it goes, get used to the platform, and then when you move forward, just be sure to use that code Josh Hall for your 20% off. All right, guys. Well, enjoy this episode on collecting content, and then be sure to let me know how your content collection goes after implementing all the strategies and processes that we cover in this episode, because I want to hear how it helps you out. You can just leave a comment on the show notes for this episode. Enjoy, apply, let's have some fun. James, great to have you on the podcast again, man.
Josh, good to be back. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it has been a little while. Yeah, you were one of my earliest episodes, and great to have you on again. This time, we're going to be talking about a subject that, look, let's be honest, web design has a lot of amazing and fun things about it. Personally, I love the ability to have the freedom and just to create whatever life I want and work when and wherever I want. The creativity that comes with it, the fact that you can do meaningful, impactful work is just amazing. However, there's a couple things that aren't so fun in web design, and one biggie is collecting content. And the reason I wanted to have you on to address this, big challenge that we all face as web designers is because you are like a master at this. And I've seen you talk about collecting content for several years now, and every time I hear about it, there's always something new that just resonates with me. So I wanted to have you on to officially tackle this beast of collecting content. Before we do that, before we dive in, for folks who didn't listen to your first episode, which I'll make sure I link in the show notes, why don't you let everyone know where you are in the world and what you do?
Yeah, well, I'm in Brisbane, Australia, which right now is coping fairly well from the whole COVID situation. We have closed the borders to our state, much to the dismay of everyone not in our state. But everyone here is very happy about it. So content snare is our main thing, right? So I guess when you were saying that, you've heard me present on this and quote unquote master, I was like, I friggin' want to be after doing this, like having our main product, collecting content from clients for 3 years or whatever it is now. So yeah, it's been a huge part of, I guess, what we do. We've learned from agencies and people that are getting content. I don't do it myself anymore. Our agency is pretty much non-existent. So yeah, it's just that. And then I have a blog on the side, jimmyrose.me, all about productivity and automation. And that's just, I love that stuff because I love saving people time. And I guess that's kind of the same thing that Content Snare does. I just am kind of tired of people doing too much work all the time. I see it all the time.
Yeah, I love that, man. I mean, the first episode I had you on, that's what we talked about, was automating your business to save up, or to save yourself basically in your schedule and free time up. We hit on content a little bit, but I knew we were going to follow up with this episode because this deserves its own episode with these strategies that you've learned. I think before we dive in, a quick backstory on how you created Content Snare and why you created that, I think would be really beneficial. Like, you ran an agency and you had the same issues that we all have with trying to get content. And did you reach a breaking point that you were like, we've got to create something to help out with this? What was the origin of Content Snare?
I wish it was, I wish I could claim responsibility for it to coming, oh yeah, got this great idea, let's go and build the thing. I actually had my heart set on another product. We've been in software since 2010, so we always wanted to create another software product. We'd sold the previous one, Silver Siphon, and we were just looking for something else to do. And I stumbled on this, I don't know what you call it, but just this methodology of asking people what their problems are. And I had this idea for something in web design. And the whole idea is to go into meetings with people with no preconceptions, not like trying to feed them the idea that you have in your mind, just talking about what the biggest bottlenecks in their process are, or biggest problems they face. And out of is something like 15 or 20 people I interviewed, every single one of them mentioned something about getting information or content as one of the biggest problems they had. So that's when I went, oh, this other thing I'm thinking about, nah, we've got to work on, it was a briefing tool, but it's long gone now. But, the content clearly was the biggest issue that people were facing. And from then it was really just like sitting down and going, yeah, well, we have that problem too. Why didn't I think of that? And then trying to create a solution that worked and testing a few things.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And then when Content Snare took off for you, did you decide I want to do this, full time and take this to a whole nother level and get out of the agency work? Or what did that look like? Just out of curiosity.
To be honest, I was kind of getting over the agency stuff anyway. It's just my personality. It doesn't really gel well with a lot of one-on-one work. I do a bit now with Zapier and automation consulting, but that's kind of it. I'm not a project work kind of person. I guess maybe it's because I'm so over it from my engineering days. But yeah, so it was always a case of if we can make this work, we will drop the agency. And at some point, it became a big enough source of income for us that we could slow down on the agency side. So we still have one big client that just pays, it's like a monthly retainer, and that helps us grow Content Snare faster. And by that I mean put in better features and spend more on development than we make in revenue, thankfully right now. But yeah.
That's awesome though, man. I mean, that's great. You're making a big impact on a lot of people. And Look, let's talk about how we can impact everyone listening to this, man. Let's start off with why clients stall. You mentioned this in a presentation you recently did on the Designer Boss Summit that I was a part of. And I love the way you said that, why clients stall, because there's some psychology with that too. And why it's so hard with collecting content. I mean, there's a lot of practical things you can imagine. First of all, I'll just say, and I'll share some of my experience with this too, If you just tell a client to give me content, it's probably not going to go well because of all the reasons you can imagine. They're going to send it to you on Friday night through text or through a Word doc. You need to tell people how to do it. But before we talk about the process and stuff, why don't we just talk about why clients stall? Like, why is this such a problem for web designers?
Yeah, totally. Well, the main thing is that it's just too difficult for them. And the easiest way to sort of think about this too is if you're in your client's shoes and you've just been through, I'm sure everyone listening has hired someone to do something before. And it almost feels like once you've made the decision to choose this designer or this person to work with, it feels like the work's done. You've been going through this like process. You've like looked at the proposal. You've looked at multiple designers maybe. You signed the proposal, paid the deposit. It feels like you've got this huge load off your shoulders. And then the first email they get is, here's a 100-page Google document for you to fill out, or like, here's like 100 items in an email for you to reply to and type some stuff in, and I need images and files and all this sort of stuff. So if that's the first thing they see, it's immediately like a terrible experience for them, because they thought they just got this load off and then you've just made it, like, put it all back on them. And the biggest way to sort that out is just managing expectations, right? Like, I feel like it's fairly simple to do, right? Just make sure it's mentioned up front in whether it's like a briefing form or in your initial call, like when you're talking to them. It's the kind of thing you need to say it early and reiterate often. I don't know whose quote I'm stealing there, but it's, you need to say it in multiple places, whether it's, you've got a page on your website that says how your process works. It needs to be there. The biggest holdup we have in every project is waiting on content. Here's the timelines in the proposal. This is how long you have to get back to us for content, for design feedback, whatever it is. Asterisk, this is where our biggest holdup is. So making it really clear to them, and also giving them options for help with content, right? Like if you say, you're not going to have the time to do this, we can help you source a copywriter. There's an upsell opportunity there for you to make more money from that client. So, and get their project done faster, help them out, so it's not, I don't know. I feel like that's just such an easy fix in a way, just so they expect what you're about to lump onto them.
I love two things that you said there. Oh, I loved it all, but I love two things really stuck out to me. And that was, first of all, you put yourself in your client's shoes. Most web designers struggle with that. And I did too. I had to really start to learn to be empathetic to their situation and put myself in the shoes of a business owner who's busy running their own business. And they've got a lot of crap on their table. And then eventually, like you said, when they move forward with you, you're likely not the first person they've talked to. And that's a big decision, particularly if you're going to drop, several $1,000s or more on a website. There's a lot that goes into that mentally. So by the time you get around to this, as a web designer, you want to make it as easy as possible. So I love that you were empathetic. And then I also love that you addressed the fact that this is the challenging part for the client. Like, you can't just be mad at the client because they're not sending you client. Well, you probably didn't set those expectations and guide them through that. And I also love that you talked about mentioning things in the beginning and consistently, like don't overwhelm them with it, but just a little asterisk. Just let them know, hey, by the way, collecting content is a big part of this. And I really recommend doing that with maintenance plans too. Like, same thing with maintenance plans. You want to at least drop the hint there and drop the seed. That way, when you get at the end of the project, you're like, hey, if you don't sign up on our monthly plan, your site's going to get hacked eventually. Then they're like, what? Like, I didn't know there was something recurring that we needed or should do. But in any case, with the content stuff, this is huge, man. And I think one of the hardest aspects of content collection is that it's different for every project. It's not a one-side. I know we're going to talk about the process here, and you can do a lot of things the same through every project. But as you know, with web design, there's projects are just different shapes, different sizes. People are different. Some people are just really scattered and unorganized, and they work wild hours. I personally love working with military people because I find them to be very time sensitive, and they get stuff done on deadlines, and they're organized. I've had like the most amazing experiences working with people from the military. Whereas there in certain industries, mostly artists and creatives, it's just all over the place. So I think that's where, we understand why it's so hard and what the challenges are for our clients. But I guess the next step is...
There is just one thing I should probably add there before we talk about the process, because you actually mentioned it there and I didn't. It's literally just the fact that it's too hard for them. So that's the other part, the main piece of this. We just talked about setting expectations, but it's also making it easy for them, because they're not going to do it if it's a super hard task. You know, like if the first thing they get, even if you've told them to expect that they need to write the content, if you just send an email and say, send me a homepage content, they're going to be like, what? Like what goes on the homepage? You know, so right. And that's what we'll get into.
Yeah. So what does that look like with the process? Like, do you recommend people let clients know of like the tools you'll use to collect the content? Is there like a step-by-step approach that you find that has worked best for your agency from years ago, but then also for people using Content Snare? Like, what's the best way to think about your process?
Right. So with regards to letting them know what tools, actually, I'd probably recommend doing that up front, like, again, as part of the proposal or whatever, as part of that setting expectations, right? And you actually also made a really good point on proposals there, and like letting them know about what comes after the website, like maintenance and marketing, really good opportunities to mention that stuff as well. Yeah. And not like buried in your terms and conditions as well. Like that should be on the front page. It's like, you know, the biggest risks to the project is getting content or you not sending us design feedback. And, you know, here's the timelines. And like, here's what happens after, you know, that's like the really important stuff to me. But anyway, the process itself is, so it's really just making it easy for clients, right? So generally, like if you send them a message that says, give me a homepage content, they don't know where to start, they don't know what to write or what it will look like. They're kind of the three major things that you need to address with your clients. You just need to, like overall, you need to make the process really easy. That's what it comes down to. But if you think about your client who's not a designer, you know, they haven't seen... they haven't been involved in the process of building 100 websites before. You have, and you can visualize what a website's going to look like before they've even signed the proposal. You've got some ideas in your head what it's going to look like and that kind of thing, but they don't. If you just like, you can go, okay, homepage, we're going to need like a hero header, we're going to have a button, we're going to have an image on the side or a background image. You know, we need a headline, maybe a subhead, and then we can have a section after that with some like logos and social proof. Like you're building that picture. They don't have any of that. So if you just go send me a homepage content, they're going to go, what?
I remember getting like a headline or a title that was literally like 3 sentences long. And I'm like, that's the first paragraph of the page. That is not a title. So yeah. And then same thing, like if you use verbiage like that, like hero image, 99.9% of clients have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe the one who dabbled in web design themselves at some point. So yeah. And I think that's important too, right? Like making the verbiage relatable, like talking at their level when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I think you're talking about visualizing it as well, which is probably key.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. And just before, there are two sides to how people use Content Snare and what kind of content you collect. It isn't necessarily always the exact content that's going on the website. Some people do that, you know, where the client writes all of the content. Sometimes it's more of like a questionnaire about like, what are your goals and missions and values and blah, 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 blah. You still use Content Snare for that kind of thing where they get the initial information and then craft that into the actual copy. You know, like what's a 1-sentence statement of what you do, or what's the 1-sentence benefits or whatever that your clients get. And then they write that into the copy. But if you are writing like getting the client to write the exact copy. Yeah. So, you mentioned it there with the 3-sentence header. If you just had a little image, like a mock-up of what the head is going to look like, you know, and this doesn't have to be the exact image of what the website's going to look like. It's just got to be a mock-up, you know, a classic UX style wireframe sort of thing, and say, this is where the header's going to go, this is where the button's going to go, and then have a box for them to type that heading in, with some actual guidance around how to write a heading. Like these are the things I'm always saying, break it down into bits. Number one, so heading, image, button text, whatever it is, put some guidance along with each of those items. So here's how to write a headline. It should aim for 6 to 12 words, no fluff. It should describe, you know, for someone coming to the website for the first time, that it needs to capture their attention in 3 seconds, blah, blah, blah. Maybe even link out to a guide on how to write headlines. Like we literally have done that before. And the third piece is visualization. So actually having that mock-up to say, this is what it's going to look like. When they can see that, it makes it so much easier for them to build that picture of what's in your mind. Because they don't have that picture. You're trying to get that picture out of your mind into theirs, and then they can look at it. Like you might even label the picture and say, number 1, here's the heading. And then the box says heading, here's how to write a heading. Now put it in here and actually limit that to 150 characters. So if they type over, it doesn't let them submit it.
Yeah. And I know we'll talk about tools because you could do this obviously with Content Snare, but you could also do some free and practical ways with Google Docs and some other stuff. But this is, we're talking about probably the worst case scenario for collecting content. And by that, I mean somebody who's really doing a lot of the content. A lot of my clients would just give me, a paragraph or a page, and then I would work with that and add on to it, or we get some copywriting help, or we'd kind of, for me personally, website redesigns and clients that were fairly hands-off were the best. But those who really wanted to have a lot of control, which is going to happen in everyone's experience, we need to be prepared for that. So this is where having this type of process is huge. So that makes total sense, man. Making it easy for them and doing it in, what'd you say, bites or phases or chunks. You don't want to tell your client you don't want to send them over a 20-page website basically that they're going to have. That's a lot of work for them to do. But if you could do it in sections, and even my web design process, the way I do it is we'll design the front page and then usually a sub page or a product or something, and then send that over for review. And what a perfect time to get the content for the first phase for those pages. And then once that's done and we're working on revisions, then they can fill out the content for the other pages. And by the time you have the revision ready and the front page is agreed upon, then you have the content for the rest of the pages. That's how it's worked out well for me. And I imagine with this type of process, that's what would work.
Yeah, and if you are doing design first, it's super easy to literally just copy out that header that you've designed and whack it into whatever tool, Content Snare, Google Docs, and that goes a long way to helping them visualize what they actually need. Yeah, it all just comes down to making it easy. If you ask for, if you send an email that says, okay, now send me the content for your homepage, about page, services, and contact or something. That's just way too, they don't know where to start. So, but if you send a thing that says, send me your content for your homepage, and it's a document or a Content Snare or whatever that has all the different bits and pieces, and they can work through that one at a time. So much easier. It's like if a mortgage broker or a loan officer, I think you guys call them in the US, comes to you and says, give me all the documents you need to get a loan. What do I need?
That is a great analogy. That's a great point, man. Yeah, that's absolutely, yes. Yeah, and again, putting yourself in the shoes of the client, they don't know anything about web design or best practices or anything. And then let's be honest, some people are really good with words and content, others are not. So having that guidance that would show them okay, I just need to limit myself to a couple paragraphs here, not a 10-page story about, something that is going to be on the homepage that's not going to work well. So that makes total sense, man. Now, what about the clients that really are just not wordsmiths, but they're providing content? Do you have any tips on helping them out other than getting a copywriter? Is it seeing the amount of words or asking them certain questions that make them think about their services or their business? Because I imagine we're not talking about SEO, but if your client sends you a couple paragraphs for the homepage and it's not going to do anyone any good, you're going to have to revise it and get some help in that area. Do you have any tips for helping clients with content? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, so you're always going to have that kind of trouble. We try to, so with Content Snare, we have this client success pack, and it's literally just a bunch of different guides on how to write different things, like how to write headlines or subheadlines, and how to write a good about page. And you can go to any level of this and tell them how to do. You can give them all kinds of guides and information and videos and training, but there are some people that are still going to struggle with it. And at that point, you kind of have to draw a line and go, guys, this is terrible. Maybe say it more diplomatically. We really recommend getting someone to write this. What you should absolutely not do, that I see so many designers doing, is just rewriting it for free. You know, like you haven't charged them to do that, but it's like if you just chuck your hands up in the air and go like, we can't, we can't publish this or whatever. Oh, I'm just going to do it for free. Like, don't do that to yourself. The amount of designers that do that, it's not good. It's an opportunity for an upsell, and I guess at some level, you might have certain clients that just push back and say, just publish what we've got. Look, maybe that's just client selection. Maybe don't put that website in your portfolio.
That's been rare. It's been rare in my experience. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you do one that you're just not proud of, yeah, take the money and don't put it in the portfolio. But yeah, no, that's a good point. Like there are, for me in my experience, that was rare to where somebody wouldn't be receptive of that. But there were a couple of circumstances where I'm like, I just don't know what what am I going to do with this? Like I had to let them know we're going to have to do something about this. And same thing, you need to definitely protect your time and charge for it accordingly or get some help on that. Mm-hmm. That should be talked about earlier. And inevitably, even if the client says, I'm good, I want to write the content, then that's where you may just mention and kind of an alt in there somewhere in the proposal that it does need to comply with best practices and standards for SEO rankings. Like if you want to get good SEO rankings, but your content is not built for SEO, we're going to need to optimize that. So that's something that people could do as well. Just kind of protecting your own butt there by saying, you're welcome to do the content, but we may need to optimize it if it doesn't comply with best standards. And we're doing this for you. Like we don't want to spend all this time and have you spend this time writing a bunch of content that's not going to work, not even aesthetically, but like literally for Google. So
Oh yeah, and that's the kind of thing you can, like you said, have it in that proposal up front and have it as an option, like a copy review or something. You may even build that into your prices. It's like, that's just part of our process. If you do not work with an actual copywriter that we've recommended, then we need to review every page. You might have some exceptions for that, but
yeah, I mean, I think I always did. It was a deliverable. It was a line in my proposal because inevitably you are going to tweak your website content for your clients. They're not copywriters. Some of them might be good at writing, but writing for letterhead and for stories or whatever is completely different than websites, particularly because a lot of clients, when it comes to conversion-based design, this is a little aside, but people scan websites, they don't read websites. So that needs to be factored in, particularly for the front page. So there's a lot of area where I feel like that should be standard, at least optimizing the content. So I would definitely tell everyone to make that a part of your process and just let clients know, in order to make sure your site is built for best practices and for SEO purposes, we're going to just optimize the content to make sure it's as good as it can be.
Yeah, I love that you said there that like writing a letterhead isn't the same as writing, like a homepage. It's so funny. The copywriting industry is just awful like that because everyone calls themselves a copywriter. But does that mean sales copy, like landing page copy, email copy, blog posts, like about pages? Yeah, everyone's got their own sort of thing and they're all copywriters. But I can tell you shouldn't get a blog post writer to write your, email copy, for example.
That's a good point, man. It really is. It's all very different. I'm kind of learning that myself. I'm like in the thick of it with that right now because the way I format and do a blog or a podcast show notes page is completely different than how I would do a tutorial. And that's different than how I would do a blog on elegant themes when I write for them. It's also way different than I would format my homepage, and it's way different than I would do social and email. So it's like, I never really thought about that, but yeah, it's like 10 different styles of writing. Yeah.
It's awful, yeah. And I learned that the hard way just hiring someone who said they were a copywriter to do sales copy, and I was like, this is a blog post.
Yeah, right. Well, and the same thing can be said for clients for website content. Like the way you want to have words on a homepage is very different. Like on a services page, that's where you can really get into the weeds of something and have some decent paragraphs. And if you have an about page with the story of your company, sure, you can have a couple pages. I mean, my about page on my site's like several pages long, but it's an about page. It's my story. So yeah, it's not going to be the highlights, So there are different styles of pages for website content too. And I think that's where having that process and having those guidelines, however you do it, whether it's Content Snare or Google Docs or something in place, that's great, man. That's key. I did want to ask you about images and like media content. What have you found? Because clients have no idea, and I'm not blaming them. I had no idea how big images were until I became a web designer. Most clients are going to send images over and then they're going to say, this is too big for email. I'll just send Josh one image at a time. I'll send him 20 emails with an image each email. I wish I could say that didn't happen, numerous times. But before I had my process in place with Basecamp and Dropbox and stuff, I had to learn that I've got to at least guide my clients with how they should give me the content. And with images, in an ideal world, a client would optimize them and they'd be ready for web. I just learned that I didn't trust my clients to do that, and they're not using Photoshop or Bridge or any of these compression tools. So I would generally just set up a Dropbox folder with, in some cases, all the images they want to give me for the site, if it's like a 5 to 10 page brochure style site. Mm-hmm. In some advanced cases, we would set up the pages as folders in Dropbox, and then I would just have them upload all the images there if there's certain galleries or stuff like that. Do you have any tips on images? Because this is a biggie. I see this all the time with my students who struggle with, like, how do I get the media and the content from clients, particularly if they want to send like a video over. What does that look like?
Use Content Snare? No, so your process is pretty much on it, right? Like, most people don't even go that far, right? If you've got a good process written out that says, here's how to provide, for each page, here's a folder, whack them in there. Clients have probably still managed to screw that up, unfortunately, but it's about the best you can do, really. Unless you have like a naming convention where you say, like, for homepage, write home _ pretty much any manual method of getting images from people is going to have potential ways they could screw it up. Which is why people use Content Snare, because it's just like drag and drop the image into this box, and we have the option to either rename it as the page that it's on and the section that it's in, or keep the original file name, depending on what your process looks like. But for for your process, it sounds like you're way ahead of most people already. Just having a decent, like, a folder structure. Instructions on how to do it. Now, as for optimizing for web, one big issue is file sizes, right? As in too small, usually. Like, they give you a logo that's like 5 pixels high or something. So having some constraints around that's where any forms-based tool can help you out. Like, Content Snare, you can obviously choose minimum widths and maximum widths and heights and whatever. Forms tools like Gravity Forms, if you're doing it that way. If you're using Dropbox or online storage, you don't really have that luxury. It's really just a case of, if they give you the wrong thing, hit them up for another one.
Yeah, because usually the common problem is that they send an image that's like 10 megabytes and it's just massive. However, you hit the nail on the head. There's the opposite problem where they send, they have a nice hero background image they send over and it's 100 pixels wide. So you have to let them know, like, it's going to look terrible when we blow this up. And they're like, well, what do you mean? It looks fine. We're like, well... Then you can get in a really technical conversation, and then you're going to overwhelm your client, which you don't want to do. Yeah. So it makes total sense that you want to have some parameters at least there.
Yeah.
Now, I never got too technical on that. It really was fairly rare that would happen. The more common issue for me was the big images, in which case we would just optimize them, and then we'd delete the original images they sent over to save space.
Yeah, and the big images is actually fairly easy to sort. A lot of designers still don't want to. That's why we brought in those image size constraints. But when we were doing this, I just used a batch resize tool. There's literally a shell, like, it puts it on the right click menu in Windows. It's literally called like Image Optimizer or bulk image resize. I can't remember what it was, but you literally just go a whole directory, right click, resize as maximum this, and it would go, right? You can do scripts like that in other Photoshop-y type tools.
Yeah, I use Adobe Bridge for bulk photo editing, which is very similar to like what you could do with Photoshop. I tried it. I always found it a bit clunky. Because Bridge is like a photography type of program. And once I learned that, man, when a client sent me over 200 images, I wasn't afraid anymore because I could go in and I could segregate them in their different folders, and then I could batch optimize them, and it was amazing. You could even change the URLs in a batch. But there's a free version for this too. There's like you said, there's a ton of different tools. I'll just link to those in the show notes though, because the free tool is what I gave my clients if they ever did images. But yeah, that makes sense. In any case, it sounds like it's the same methodology. give them some
You can get
guidance,
pretty-
give them some guidelines.
Yeah, you can get pretty complicated with that batching too, right? Like I remember we had a wine store that had literally like 2,000 wines, and they gave us images that were like, you know, landscape and portrait, and like it was unbelievably all over the place. And we ended up writing a script that would, you know, open them up, center them, and like reduce the width to like 1,000, and then crush the height in as well, and then put like a black or whatever the color box around it was, and all of that was batch scripted to do like 2,000 images, and it was amazing.
Yeah, we just a couple months ago we wrapped up on a big e-commerce project with over 200 products, and that was one of the issues. Was they did a good job of providing content in all the separate folders, but we didn't really specify the ideal size, which I don't know if they could have done that anyway. So we had to basically manually do those. So I know Jonathan, my lead designer, probably having nightmares and flashbacks from that one. But yeah, that makes sense, man. Yeah, so it sounds like, you know, it's all, again, going back to good communication, making them as, you know, guide them. Again, you just need to guide them. You need to be their guide. And luckily, when it comes to being the guide, you can have a lot of this stuff in place in a document, so you don't have to literally do it every project.
Yeah, and if you do have the folder structure like you had, as long as they have a really easy to follow guides, like step 1, like click this link, whatever it is, if it's a Dropbox link, like step 2, for your homepage, put it in this folder, you know, like this is how we want you to name the folders. It's just super, super easy instructions for them.
Yeah, and then for everyone listening who's already getting overwhelmed by this, just keep in mind, James and I, we're talking about like the worst case scenario, I feel like, with really in-depth projects, in-depth clients who are detailed. The majority of my web design projects did not need this much detail with the content collection. Most of them, if it was a 5 to 10 page brochure style site, usually one folder would be fine. They'd send me like 10 or 15 images. They'd give me all the content. Sometimes they'd separate it by page, which was great. And then I could roll with that. But in extreme cases, we'd have to get more detailed, particularly if we were doing more content, more SEO. But I wanted to transition and ask you 2 things here, James, about deadlines and reminders, because these are 2 very overlooked but super, super important aspects of good content collection. Let's talk about deadlines. How important is it to give our clients some sort of deadline? Not as in some like militaristic, you know, overbearing type of designer trying to keep them going, but just for the sake of, like, it's good for them too to have some sort of deadline.
Yeah, so I'm kind of a fan of militaristic ones now. Kidding, but yeah, there are varying levels of this, like how far you're willing to, I guess, push it, because sometimes you do need to be a little bit more aggressive. Obviously, deadlines are very important, needs to be communicated in the proposal, and also what needs to be communicated is what happens if they miss that deadline. Like if you give them 2 weeks for content collection, what happens then? Now, the typical thing, my absolute favorite way to handle this is a clause that says, if you miss a deadline, you know, whether that's for design feedback, for content, whatever it is, your project gets, depends what the wording you want to use. You could say archived, or we just say we stop work on your project and it goes back into the queue. And then
I like that. I was going to say back burner, but that didn't sound as good as back of the queue. Yeah.
Well, so generally what we say is it goes back burners. Yeah. I don't know what the best word is, but we just say we stop working. And then when you give us everything we need, then it goes back into the queue. So it doesn't just go back to the queue. It just sits there on the side. And, you know, right now we've got quite a few projects in the queue, so we can't promise when we'll get back to that. So that line, oh man, that gets people moving.
I love that because I don't know anyone personally who has done this, but I've heard examples of agencies, probably the militaristic type of agencies who treat clients like numbers on a spreadsheet, that they would like charge them a fee if they miss their deadline, or they would have a much more harsher approach. But I like the idea of letting them know, like, listen, this deadline isn't for any other reason than for your benefit. Like, we need to keep the project moving. And in order to do that and to get it done on time, we need to get the content. We need what we need as quickly as we can and by this deadline, because this is in our schedule. So I love that analogy and that verbiage of saying, you know, if you miss this, your project's just going to be on the side and it's going to be, you know, at the bottom of the queue, or we'll put it in the queue when we get your content. Because
and it should be.
That's the killer. That's the killer of so many projects.
Yeah, and I mean they should understand too. Like a lot of people are actually quite understanding of that. A lot of clients, when you say, "Look, we've got a business to run. We can't just stop work and wait for you to give us the stuff. So we'll stop work and then we just put it to the side. And then when you're ready, get the stuff to us, and we'll put you back into the queue. Right now, there's 6 projects in the queue, so we can't promise like all of our deadlines, our original deadlines will change based on. We'll give you that new date when you give us all the content." And you can do that very diplomatically and still scare the hell out of them.
Yeah, because that's most clients. That's one of my biggest frequently asked questions is, how long does a project take or a website design take? And I usually always say 30 to 45 days once we get all the content, because that's when it all depends. Like some clients don't send content for 30 days. And of course, it's not going to take 30 days if we don't get the content. And then there's been a couple situations in the past where I remember clients didn't send a thing over, and then 2 weeks later, they'd reach out and say, "Hey, how's the website coming?" And I'd be like, "It looks like a blank page because you haven't sent me anything." Now, I didn't say that to them, but that's what went through my mind, and I had to let them know, I just had to say that. We can't, we're not going to hit the deadline without us getting content in time. And then they need to understand, and most do, like you said, most are very understanding that if a client doesn't send you content for a month, you're not going to bust that site out in that 45-day deadline. There's no way. So I think that's really important too. Having that clause, just letting people know is, really the way the project is going to go as far as meeting the deadline is up to you. Like it's really, as long as you hit our deadlines, we'll do our end of the bargain, but you got to do yours. And I want to say this because I think it's a super important statement for you to relay to your clients, and that is that deadlines are good for them. They are necessary, because I'm a big fan of deadlines too, man. James, you're a course creator and you do a lot of like projects that you don't really like need to do, or you could take as long as you wanted. But I'm sure you've experienced this when you transition from the agency world. If you give yourself a year to do something, you'll take a year to do it. You'll just figure out how to drag it on and make it more difficult. Whereas if you give yourself a deadline, you got to get it done. And that's what's so good. And there's a lot of freedom in that too, because it'll make you not overthink things. I just had an episode, a few episodes back on episode 50, talking about feedback and revisions. And deadlines were a really big part of that too, because it forces the client to give you something within that time frame. Whereas otherwise they could just overthink it. Like if you just tell a client, "Give me your content," no wonder it takes 3 weeks and they disappear because they're overwhelmed and they're overthinking it. They don't know what to do. So,
but you can also get them. You can get them to create their own deadlines, right? That's part of the briefing and that project setup in the beginning is, when do you want this live? And then you can work back from that. And then it's not like you imposing deadlines on them. It's their own deadlines. So you're not going to look like the bad guy. The other part of that, you asked 2 questions about deadlines and reminders. I mean, the reminders part is pretty simple. It's literally just remind them regularly, and there are plenty of tools that can help you with that. Like any email follow-up, like I use follow-up then I use this for everything, right? This isn't just for getting content. It's anything that I need to follow up on people with. If I send an email to someone, like if I was like, "Josh, I want you on my podcast," I'm just going to assume that you're going to forget that email. I know you
James. I would never forget.
I know you won't.
I would be honored and thrilled, but yeah, your average schmuck who's going to forget, yeah.
No, I just assume everyone is going to forget. It's got nothing to do with the person. It's got the fact
probably a good way to go. Yeah, it's
the fact that they're a human. Like, and they're probably dealing with tons of email, and it might get buried, it might get spammed. Like, who knows? Just if you're sending it, basically, if I'm sending an email to someone, I use a tool that's going to bounce that back to me if they don't reply. And I like follow up then because it's like super cheap with the response detection, or free without it. And it works without any browser extensions or anything. It's literally just you BCC an address like 7days@followupthen.com and it bounces back to me. Love it. But yeah, so I pretty much just assume if I'm sending an email to someone, they're not going to reply. So I just always BCC, something like that. So get that bounce back, and it applies to content as well. So you need to make sure you're on top of your clients. It's really that simple. There's various ways. You could have a project management system that's just automatically sending them a reminder every
Yeah, we have that with Basecamp. I was going to say, because I know you have that with Content Snare where it's like automated, but again, you could do it in a variety of different ways. And I think not only is it good for you as a designer to see something like, okay, where are we? Do we have the content or not? But for your clients, every once in a while, like if they have 2 weeks to do something, they're likely going to wait like a few days before they need to do it. It's just like anyone with a paper in school or something. You're always going to procrastinate more than likely. So even for them, like if they get a reminder well in advance, like just a reminder in 1 week, they're like, oh crap, yeah, let me just go ahead and bust that out. Like it's a great way to go about it. Now, that I feel like that's obviously very common for the first round of content, but what about the ongoing process? Like as content continues, and are there different levels of reminder? Like, are there reminders for content versus images, or what have you seen in the web design agency world? Like, are there different types of reminders that you've seen work well, or?
Yeah, that's really dependent on the agency and what kind of clients you're working with, whether it's professional type, super professional kind of messages, or you want to go more personal or more aggressive, like in Content Snare, for example. One of the examples I use that's kind of funny when I'm doing the video demos is like there's the normal follow-ups and then there's the aggressive follow-ups. Like you just set a different schedule for different clients that need it. So some people like to separate content into stages, right? So it's almost like what you were saying before. So stage one might be the homepage, just the homepage, and then it might be, about and contact, and then it might be services or products, whatever, actually breaking those down into sections, just so at least then you get one thing done at a time and you've got the reminders specific to the homepage. You may overlap them, so you start sending the about page request before the homepage is done. Yeah, so we're actually experimenting in Content Snare now. We've made the percent complete available as a variable for emails, so you can send out and say, "Hey, you're like 50%." Cool. Yeah, and the due date is here, and you're only 50% complete. Yeah, so
you could even do that manually, though. Even if you just feel like you're about 3/4 of the way there with your client, just let them know, like, "Hey, we've only probably got about a fourth left. So can you just get us, by the end of the weekend, do you think you get us this content? Because we're almost there." Just let them know. And one thing I wanted to say, this is big for content collection, but also just web design projects in general, particularly because you're working with different clients and it's a person-to-person type of project, is it's really all about momentum. And anytime you can build that momentum, this is big for creativity. Like I always found when I got going with a website, I would inevitably look at it and just be like, I've got nothing. And then I would just push through it. And then I would feel like it just sucks. Then I'd come the next day after sleeping on it. And then I'd be like, okay, you know what? This isn't that bad. Let me tweak this and tweak this. And then all of a sudden I've got a pretty sweet design. And that's what like kicked off the momentum for me. And then I was able to design the next page and the next page. And the same is true with content, I've found, particularly for clients, because again, they have no idea what this content is going to turn into. If they can see the homepage done, or at least, a really nice design, they might be like, wow, that little Word doc that I filled out or whatever that had the title and the subheading and a couple paragraphs. And then they, Josh and his team asked me for a bullet list of services. Like, look how they added graphics to these services. That very well may encourage them to get going on the next stuff because they got some momentum. So I think that's another big thing with deadlines, and just for me, doing it by phases, just building that momentum, get them pumped up, because you'll likely get content a lot faster that way.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's a kind of big thing that I'm always encouraging is it's like that bite-sized pieces thing again, but also encouraging them to get a couple of pieces done. Like not saying we need all your content in one go, in one email, like homepage, about page, everything all in one go, boom. That's all you can do. No, it's like they should be allowed to start on the homepage and do a couple of little bits here and there and then come back to it later. That's where generally forms as a tool kind of fall down, because they have to do it all in one go. It's overwhelming. That's what actually, like if you have documents where they're allowed to come in, like a specific document for them, they've got a little box where they can type in, then they can come back next time and do the next box and do the next box, as long as it's like saving on the fly. Obviously Content Snare is the same. We try to display one thing at a time. As they type it, it's saved, so they can come in and complete more things one at a time. it's less overwhelming that way.
And that's the importance of not collecting content through email or through, God forbid, text or something like that, where, they're dinging you. Like, if your client wants to work on Friday nights at 10:30, then they can, if it's in Dropbox or Content Snare, which, look, I'm much more empathetic to that now too, because I realize that clients are doing their businesses all day, and some of them have families, and the only time they get to work on their own business might be 10:30 on a Friday night or Saturday morning. So like I used to get mad about that when I'd hear from clients, and then I just realized I don't need to look at my email on Friday nights at 10:30. They can freaking wait till Monday morning. Like that I don't need, I didn't need to put myself in that 24/7 on-call role, because that's really big with collecting content. I stressed myself out so many times unnecessarily by being in that 24/7 role where the clients were fine. Like, they can, they can submit the stuff. I don't want them texting me, but they can submit the stuff, and then I'll get to it Monday morning when we're at it. So
that makes a lot of sense. But then the downside of that is the 100 emails you might have on Monday morning.
True. Yeah, that's true. That's where, like, having those guidelines in, like, if you look, we've got 5 folders set up for you. You can put your content in there whenever you want, wherever you want, as long as it hits our deadline. And then by the time we log in, there it is. Yeah, that's getting out of the email thread for sure.
Yeah.
Now, I did want to ask you, James, like, worst case scenario, we've got the process, we've got our expectations set, their expectations set, we've got our reminders in place. We're using Content Snare. We have our own process with Dropbox or Basecamp or Asana, whatever we're using. But the client still just isn't providing content. What have you seen in worst case scenarios? Like, is there a point where we just have to stand our ground and charge more, or charge a fee, or just put the project off completely? Or what have you seen in that regard? Like, when things just, because inevitably there are some clients who just, for whatever reason, drag their feet completely. And it can really, the problem with that, aside from the obvious, is for me, I just lose steam on the project. Like, I lose all excitement if a project goes past a month or two and we're still waiting on content. I'm done. Like, I'm mentally done with that project. So have you seen anything like that? Or what would you suggest if we do when we get into that? Because it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
More than likely, it's going to happen.
Yeah, look, and I mean, the main thing, it's like we said before, the whole system where it goes to the back of the queue, and it can just go there indefinitely. Even if you're not excited, maybe you just play a little bit more hardball if it goes on for 6 months, but then it's like, no, you've got to have everything like perfect before we'll even start on this project again. If they're still emailing you and carrying on, then at some point you probably need to invoke and charge some kind of fee. Because obviously if this goes on indefinitely and you're still doing little bits of work here and there, even if that's just responding to emails and saying you haven't sent us everything, or looking through some more crap that they've given you, that's your time. So at some point you'll need to charge, and some element of that needs to be in your contract, like, so that you can charge. Or reactivation fee.
Yeah, everyone who's been through my business course has seen what I have in mind, which is basically a clause that states, if we haven't heard from you or are waiting on content, it'd be one thing if they just owe us a home page or, an about page or something. Of course, we're not going to, be that strict. But if they've just disappeared, then at 6 months, basically what I say is we have the option to charge more for the project. Like, we have an additional percentage that we'll add if, it's been 6 months. After a year, if we haven't heard, or we're just, you've just disappeared, then we have the option to cancel the project on our end. Because after a year, that's a problem. Like, that had happened to me before years ago. I remember I had clients disappear, and then a year and a half later, they'd come back like, hey, we want to continue on. And I'm like, I don't even remember what the heck we planned or what we talked about for this project. So that's got to be in there. I know that's a little bit outside of collecting content, but nonetheless, it's
that's and it's a really good thing, because it's a problem that's associated with collecting content when they drag their feet that much. So like 100% totally okay to do that. And you can have it in your contract that if that happens, you still keep the deposit, and that's just the way it is.
Yep. Well, hey man, I know you're getting close on time, so we'll get to wrapping up here. I wanted to ask really quickly about tools. Obviously, the obvious is Content Snare. We've talked about some sort of project management system like Basecamp or Asana. You can collect content there. However, if it's really complex content or a lot of it, that's where I've seen like Google Drive or Dropbox be really beneficial. Are there some other tools that you've seen or would recommend for people, whether free or premium?
Yeah, so I mean, we have covered most of them. One thing I would say is like try not to require your clients to log in. That's generally a big problem with project management tools. I know a lot of people come to Content Snare from like Asana or Basecamp or whatever, where they're trying to use almost like a client portal kind of aspect where the client has to remember a password and log in. If you've got a password on things, it's generally your clients are going to screw it up. They'll forget it. They'll come to you again. It's just more friction that you don't need. So anything that doesn't require a login. So Google Docs can work, but it obviously requires a Google account, and we have had many reports of clients struggling with that, which is surprising. You know, like as me and you, with you and I, probably should say that right.
I mean, I am not the one to ask that. So.
Yeah, I don't care. I'd prefer to say it the wrong way just for fun to annoy the people that it bothers.
Oh yeah,
but
don't come to Josh and James for grammatically correct sentences.
No, absolutely not.
We're simple folk.
Yep, absolutely. So, but if you do want to use Google Docs, and that can work with a lot of clients, I found a little trick is to almost emulate forms, to just put a 1-by-1 table in the form. So in the document, sorry. So then you can have a heading 1, which is like homepage or something, or the document's called homepage. A heading 1 is like, this is the header, and then you can have descriptions under that, like have some text in the document that is your guidance, you know, how to write a headline or whatever, and then have an actual 1-by-1 table that is like, this is the box you type into. Don't type anywhere else. Because if you give them free form access, they're going to put crap all over the place. They still probably will with Google Docs. They're going to highlight things and say, put it in red italics and say, can you please link this word to the about page or something? It's the classic problem with Google Docs. But it really helps constrain that. It's a good little trick. One system I've seen that works really nice is put it in a landscape, and then have like guidance and images down the left-hand side as a table here. So you've got a 2-column table where the left-hand side is instructions and the right-hand side is where they're typing stuff in. So then you can kind of see it as you scroll down the page.
Okay.
I like that system. Other tools, there's forms. If you want to, if it's a small amount of stuff and you think they can get it all done in one go, any forms tool can help you with that. Like
Gravity Forms or Caldera or something.
Yeah, the save and continues and those kind of things generally don't work very well, or clients will screw them up. So generally only small amounts of content that they can do in one go. Uploading things to Dropbox or Google Drive, that can work. Any file upload system, if you want to accept Word documents, obviously you've got to deal with versioning problems then if they send multiple versions of the same thing.
Yeah, and Windows versus Mac, there's always been some fun with that too.
Yeah. So what else? Those are the main things other than Content Snare. Like there is no other. Pretty much every designer is using some combination of shared folders, online documents, shared folders like Dropbox, forms, and then Content Snare is the one we tried to. That's literally why we built it, is because all those other systems tend to have some kind of drawback. So we built it into one tool.
Yeah, that makes total sense, man. This is great. Well, James, man, always great stuff with you. I always pick up something new, and just such gold that you dish out, particularly in this subject of collecting content, because I know you're so passionate about this, because we want to free ourselves up and enjoy our work, and we also want to help our clients. And I think, let me just recap. So we talked about making it easy for clients, good communication. You really got to cover your own butt with having a lot of this stuff mentioned and the proposal stage and contracts. We talked about creating your own process and utilizing the tools that you want to use. Talking about, how it's going to go down, setting those expectations, deadlines, reminders, helping our clients, get past all that. But then also, again, going back to disclaimers, having that in there just in case we have that rare client that does drag their feet. We talked about some tools, and that all leads to a much better web design experience all around. And I just I'm going to ask you a final thought here. Mine would be just let the client know that this isn't set in stone. Like, they don't need to pressure themselves too much with the content, because websites can always be updated, always be revised. Like,
Yes.
let them know this is the homepage for now, but it's not, particularly if clients are used to doing like billboard ads where they're locked in for a year with this billboard. Hopefully it works. Like with a website, we can try this out. Don't stress about it. That's what I would say to people talking with their clients. Do you have any kind of final thought?
Yeah, I really like that. One caveat on that is I would say that that's part of the maintenance plan after you launch, or like a phase 2. Because if you allow them to update it while you are trying to get the website live, that's like a big no-no. Because then you end up in these. Oh,
exactly.
Man,
I'm talking like, let them know, in 3 months from now, if you decide you want to revamp the front page or add, more content, then we can do that, or we can change what we have. It's,
That's a reason I brought that up is because it's literally why we built the approval feature in Content Snare. So once it's approved, they can't go and change it on you and say, oh, but that's the content. No, this is what we agreed to.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But actually, for my final thoughts, I mean, it's really, I'm just steal 2 things you just said. We want to enjoy our work and make our clients happy, or help our clients, and that's the content collection is such a good opportunity to do both of it. Back up. Content collection really can make you not enjoy your work. It's one of the most unenjoyable parts of work.
There's 2 things: revisions and feedback together, and then content collection. Yeah. Those are like the banes of every web designer's existence.
And so that's why content collection can really help you. Like, getting a good process together can get rid of that and help you enjoy your work.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think, wasn't in your Designer Boss presentation where you were like, no designer gets into web design because they're like, I want to wake up and remind people to send me images. Like, no one wants to do that. They want to design a website. So, you can spend way more time doing that if you're not careful with this type of process, which is why this is so important.
Yeah, and if you can get that off your plate using some kind of system or process, then you're going to be so much happier. And the second part is helping your clients and making them happy. So if you can make the process just dead simple for them, it makes you look like an absolute pro. That's, I'm stealing the things you said as my final thoughts, but it's perfect. Those 2 things, man. That's where content collection, that's where it helps so much. And those 2 things are really big deals.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, James, thanks so much for your time and for sharing your ever continued nuggets of wisdom, man. I've really enjoyed, our relationship over the past few years, and I learned something from you every day, man, every time we talk. And
Josh, right back at you, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you. For everyone watching on video, James is looking really good nowadays because he's got his new camera all set up, background. Man, I miss the drum set. I do miss the electronic drum set.
Yeah, it wasn't a very good background.
This is like James. This is like professional James 2.0. No more drum set in the background.
I know. It was a good conversation starter. That's why I whacked the skateboard there. Hopefully someone talks about that. But, the new lens actually blurs the background, so you can't see anything there anyway. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, let's look good, man. All right, James. Well, hey, man, I know you got to rock and roll. So, thanks again. I don't think this will be the last time. We'll have you on again here soon.
Absolutely not. And I'm sure we'll have you on Agency Highway at one point as well.
Deal. All right, man. Cheers.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.